A building is made of structural and non-structural elements. Examples of structural elements are foundations, beams, columns, shear walls, etc. Structural elements are designed to carry gravity and other environmental loads. They provide stability to a building. Good structural performance during earthquakes ensures damage limitation, collapse prevention, and safe occupancy afterwards. Non-structural elements are those components not designed to carry loads acting on the building. Some of them may be anchored to structural elements of the building. Examples of non-structural elements are architectural elements such as partition walls, doors, windows, balconies, false ceilings. Services and utilities such as electrical, gas, and water services. Building contents such as furniture and equipment. Even when structural performance is good, poor performance of non-structural elements can result in economic losses and safety concerns for occupants. Falling and overturning objects can injure occupants. Damage to utilities such as gas and electrical lines can cause secondary effects like fire. If passages and doors are blocked by falling objects, the risk of injury is even greater. They might also interact with structural elements and negatively impact them. Non-structural damage can be caused by moderate earthquakes, which are very frequent in different parts of Europe. Since a large portion of the cost of a building is invested in non-structural elements, reducing non-structural damage is very important for risk mitigation. The goal of the No Risk Project is to help citizens and institutions mitigate seismic risk by reducing potential damage to non-structural elements. The No Risk Project Consortium is made of 4 research institutions working in the fields of seismology, earthquake engineering, and disaster risk reduction. The Instituto Superior Técnico of Portugal is the project coordinator, the Laboratorio Nacional de Engenharia Civil of Portugal, the Istituto Nazionale di Geofisica e Vulcanologia in Italy, the Earthquake Engineering Research Center of the University of Iceland. The No Risk Project started in January 2016 and lasted 2 years. It was co-financed by the Humanitarian Aid and Civil Protection Mechanism of the European Commission. To turn science into practice, a Research for Action block developed the scientific knowledge to create practical tools for risk communication, that is, the prevention block. No-risk project actions were implemented and tested in pilot areas in the participating countries. Pilot areas were different in terms of frequency and severity of seismic hazard, level of intrusiveness of seismic risk in daily lives of citizens, vulnerability of the society, and the level of risk awareness and mitigation measures in place. The last major earthquake affecting Lisbon occurred in 1969. This earthquake caused a few casualties in Lisbon. Most economic losses in Lisbon were due to non-structural damage. Today, the city has more than 500,000 inhabitants, and many buildings were built before the first seismic code was implemented in 1958. These buildings are seismically vulnerable. Because damaging earthquakes are infrequent, seismic risk is perceived as something distant in inhabitants' social memory and has a low degree of intrusiveness in their daily lives. In Italy, damaging earthquakes are frequent. In the worst hit areas, human casualties and building collapse are common, and structural damage is extensive. In Mount Etna area in northern Italy, where medium to small magnitude earthquakes are more frequent, non-structural damage is common. In many ancient Italian cities, non-structural architectural elements of old buildings pose a risk to the citizens. Risk due to movement of building contents is often inadequately mitigated. The South Iceland lowland is the largest agricultural region of the country. It contains many small towns and villages, as well as critical infrastructure. Here, disaster risk management is more integrated in people's routines. Level of risk awareness and knowledge on safety procedures among citizens are relatively high. Risk maps were prepared to understand damaging earthquake scenarios. They are effective to communicate vulnerability and risk due to non-structural damage to policymakers, local government, and other stakeholders. To be useful for common citizens, such maps should have the following desirable features. It should be easy to spot and locate neighborhoods in risky areas. It should be easy to identify public buildings like schools, health clinics, etc. in the neighborhood. A small territory with street names, building footprints, landmarks, etc. helps locate familiar areas. It should suggest solutions depending on the level of risk. It is important to engage communities in preparation and use of maps. Their feedback can help ensure that the maps are understandable and useful to the general public. What is the most typical damage that non-structural elements may suffer? Different approaches were used to understand this phenomenon. Photographs and other documentation of damage recorded in the study areas during past earthquakes were collected and studied to identify vulnerable elements. Full-scale experiments of a bedroom were conducted in the shaking table of Laboratorio Nacional de Ingeniería Civil to observe the onset and severity of motion of household objects. The experiment was also used to understand the efficacy of protective measures. Stakeholders were involved in designing and implementing risk communication tools and methods. The objective is to understand the opinions and beliefs of the target audience. It is also important to understand their needs and constraints in risk reduction. This action is a benchmark study on stakeholder engagement in risk communication and mitigation. Several forms of stakeholder engagement were used in this project. The methods used included focus groups, interviews, and discourse analysis. The stakeholders involved were common citizens, teachers, business owners, facility managers, politicians, and local authorities. Interests, needs, priorities, and obstacles to prevention were assessed with a scientific methodology. The city of Ferrara in northern Italy was one of the case study areas. The study area has a typical urban fabric. The citizens are not well aware of seismic risk, despite having an experience of a recent earthquake, which caused non-structural damage. Some prevention actions taken after the last earthquakes were evaluated in terms of how effective they have been among common people in terms of memory, knowledge, prevention, and communication. Schools were one of the target areas of this action. School children are a vulnerable group when it comes to non-structural risk. It is therefore important to raise their awareness about risk and mitigation measures. This task prepared a protocol for intervention in the form of communication aimed at school children. Although students cannot be expected to take drastic mitigation actions at a young age, raising their awareness will be useful to develop a culture of safety. This is a culture where children grow up with increasing knowledge about risk and mitigation measures and will take action to mitigate risk when they are adults. This task used active and participatory learning strategies. In this strategy, active participation and hands-on learning experience were emphasized by making students one of the main actors in the communication process. This was achieved by having the students prepare awareness and mitigation communication tools such as exhibition videos, stories, cartoons, etc. These tools were used to communicate with their peers with their own language, approach, and icons about the importance of reducing non-structural vulnerability. The No Risk project prepared a short student's guide to raise awareness on risky situations due to building contents in homes and schools. The guide not only shows risky situations, but also indicates the simplicity of potential mitigation measures. The videos of shake table experiments demonstrating the difference between a room with and without protective measures during earthquakes was very useful to raise awareness of potential risks and the simplicity and effectiveness of protective measures. One of the products of the project, aimed at common citizens, is a simple and practical guide for non-structural risk mitigation. The No Risk Practical Guide is designed to help common citizens understand the mitigation measures, their complexity, cost, feasibility, and required technical expertise. The practical guide focuses on solutions that are easily implemented but very effective in reducing risk. It is designed as a path towards increasing safety. It starts with simple measures such as moving heavy and loose objects. It then goes on to measures such as securing and fixing objects that might move during earthquakes. More involved measures such as retrofitting and strengthening architectural components and utilities follow. The actions along the mitigation path increase progressively in terms of required time, money needed, and expert knowledge, thus helping the citizens take immediate actions where possible and plan actions that are more complex or costly. 30,000 practical guides in Lisbon were distributed, and local parishes put the information on their website, Facebook pages, and parish citizen services. Parishes are preparing their own printings. The product of the project aimed at business groups and experts, which require more involved solution measures, is the portfolio of solutions to reduce non-structural damage. The portfolio is more detailed than the practical guide in both scope and contents. It provides detailed recommendations on implementation of mitigation measures. The portfolio of solutions is based on a rational classification of non-structural damage. The elements are ranked in terms of their relevance in life safety, property loss, functional loss, expertise needed for mitigation, and cost of mitigation. Risk mitigation measures for 47 most important non-structural elements are included in the portfolio. Short videos, augmented reality, and simple games were used to communicate to the general public. A video based on shake table tests was prepared highlighting the move, protect, secure, retrofit strategy. This strategy is compatible with the practical guide. Augmented reality enriches the real world with digital information in various formats, such as photos, videos, and text. It can also include 3D effects. It can be used on mobile devices, such as tablets and smartphones. No Risk used augmented reality to present its products to the public. No Risk turned practical tools into games. One of the innovations of the No Risk project is evaluation of communication actions. The project designed methods and tools to evaluate communication actions. The tools and methods are designed to assess effectiveness of communication quantitatively. A questionnaire was designed to assess knowledge of the risky phenomenon, attitude towards it, and practice to mitigate risk. Implementation of the questionnaire before and after communication campaign was used to evaluate the effectiveness in raising awareness on the need to reduce the risk posed by non-structural elements. The assessment was carried out in schools, which are a closed environment and allow a simple and well-constrained assessment. The challenge that No Risk faced was to establish effective risk communication concerning mitigation of non-structural element risks. Just letting the public know about it is not enough. No Risk provided simple and ready-to-use tools for risk mitigation.